This is Eagle 7 Sports Radio, 90 minutes with Mathematical. My main guest for this morning, Dr. Tunde Adegbola. I have sang your praises all morning before now. We have read editorials. I've told everybody that you are a research scientist, an engineer, a teacher, a culture activist, and of course, an associate adjunct. You have taught so many subjects, including AI, artificial intelligence, which is fascinating for me.
I think I have the singular honor of having taught AI for 30 years in the last 30 years.
Wow, in the last 30 years to have taught AI. So you see, we are in front of somebody who should now be able to tell us, and I use the word demystify, because I think there are misconceptions, misinformation, and shrouded in all kinds of mysticism of that subject called Ifa. So help us bring it down to its elemental form. Help us break it down. ABC. Is Ifa a secret society? Is it metaphysics? Is it deity? Is it just Yoruba wisdom? Is it science? Or is it sport, as in my own case, where I had my own small experiences in sport? So what, in your own definition, as elementary as you can make it, is Ifa?
Well, for me, the whole mysticism and multidimensionalism of Ifa comes from the fact that the Yoruba see knowledge as a whole. The Yoruba, we do not break down knowledge into departments and looking at them in departments. We look at knowledge as a whole. So for that reason, you find all sorts of things bunched up in Ifa. But for me, as a scholar, a person who in Yoruba you will refer to as an akawegbofa rather than entotefa. If you strip Ifa of the mystical dimensions, what you find in Odu Ifa is a voluminous yet dynamic collection of age-old wisdom. From my point of view, as somebody who works in IT, I call it age-old big data. But it's because it is oratoral. It is not literature. It is orature. So we can look at it as an oratoral encyclopedia of the Yoruba knowledge system. So even though I acknowledge its religious dimensions, I admit to a lack of intellectual temperament and capacity to investigate the religious aspect of it. I don't have such instruments. I was not trained in that tradition to be able to engage religion scholastically. So I keep to my track of engineering. So for me, in a nutshell, that is what IFA is. It's a way of keeping experience and knowledge of the people so that it can be applied and used when needed. I think for now, I'll keep it there. That's for me what it is.
And also explains immediately why a pastor, why the son of a bishop would be involved in Ifa as divination. You know, that subject itself. You are a pastor, you are a preacher, you are the son of a bishop. And in the misconception of Ifa, people think more of it as religion, the spirituality of it.
I'm the son of a bishop. The fact that I am a born-again Christian, I'm a preacher, I am a Christian apologist. All those don't affect my relationship with Ifa. Ifa as an academic subject. Like I said earlier on, I acknowledge the religious, the mystical, the sacred dimensions of it. But as a scholar, I do not have the resources to engage the religious part of it. But like I said earlier on, that I have friends who are atheists. They don't even believe that God exists. But they study, they sit down, they go to university and study theology to the point of getting a PhD in it. So if atheists who don't believe in God can study theology and get PhD in it, why should I, a Christian, not have sufficient interest in my heritage to study Ifa? So for me, the issue doesn't arise at all. And besides, the bishop that you are talking about got his PhD in Ifa.
Incredible. Incredible.
You can go and Google Adegbola and you'll find that University of Bristol.
Okay, let me maybe at this point so that I can set the background to my interest, and related to what I'm sure I would ask Peter, who would just come in briefly at this point. That you see, when I came to the West in 1970, and that was my first real experience of living in Yoruba land. And of course, I was a football player. After 2 or 3 years, I was so well known. And it's about winning. And football is such a big game, the biggest club in Yoruba land. And naturally, if you wanted to win, every footballer in the world has something they depend on, going to play and and hope that you are going to win. You go into some prayer. We took a pastor with us who was praying and fasting throughout. Some of the players were fasting, consult with powerful parapsychologists during certain events. They will bring babalawos to come and talk to you, and then you will bring all different denominations of Christian churches and Muslim clerics and do that. So a lot of these practices, we are brought into football and personal experiences. This is seeking divine intervention of one sort or the other. So my own experience with Ifa is really just spiritual. It's not even religious. It is spiritual. And you don't want to know, the sort of things that we go through either as individuals or collectively as a team when it comes to playing and hoping to secure the support of the divine. So that's where Ifa came in for me, because it was like consulting to find out what is going to happen in the future. You will consult Ifa so that they will tell you, you are going to win. If you are not going to win, they will change your fortune, and so on and so forth. So let me go to a Catholic, somebody who was a Catholic, deep in the faith of Catholicism, and who now is an Ifa devotee. You listened to Tunde Adegbola there. Tell us about his own pursuit of knowledge in Ifa. And he separates now, all his knowledge from the spiritual side of it. So in your being a devotee of Ifa, is it religious, is it spiritual, or is it like, in his own case, scholarship and scientific? Peter?
Well, first of all, Dr. Adegbola, or the Professor Adegbola, it's such an honor to be here.
Thank you very much.
But I've watched your videos multiple times, and I've just found it intriguing, the scholarly aspect of Ifa. Because for me,
thank you,
as a journalist, oftentimes what you've always thought about is the fact that the Ifa religion or cultural practice, the fact that it's not documented, etc., that everything is oratory, is where the problem lies. But let me answer the question really quickly. So for me, it's a religious experience. And I've had a religious experience all my life. I was born into a very strong Catholic family. So with that being said, religion is an integral part of my upbringing. We wake up in the morning, we sing the hymn, we pray, etc. Even when I became an adult, a teenager, my routine is when I wake up, I will sing the psalm. I'll pray, sometimes the rosary, etc. So I was already used to having some form of edification from prayers, and from the Catholic Church, you have prayer books, which I've memorized, the entire rosary block from my head. So when I came in contact with an old friend, well, before then, I got to a point when I felt like there was a lot of challenges to my Catholicism. I had friends in the Pentecostal evangelical world who kept making snide comments about Catholicism, saying the Pope was the Antichrist, saying we were idol worshiping. The whole Catholic experience was wrong, etc., etc. So, as a young man wanting to serve God, that was discombobulating for me. So, yeah, okay, maybe this is wrong. So, while trying to be devout, while trying to get details as to my faith so that I can at least answer people. For instance, there's something we do during Lent called Ash Wednesday, where you have a mark on your forehead. I would never forget, I was in high school. We'd gone to mass very, very early in the morning. I turned up to school with the ash on my forehead. A friend said, Macjob, Tiffin, Antichrist marks. You couldn't, I was so overwhelmed. I've gone to church in the morning. I prayed to God. I have this mark on my head that I'm supposed to like start fasting. And now people are calling it the mark of the beast. So I just got really fed up. Found myself in the Pentecostal gathering. And that's where I lost my faith completely. Because I met people trying to chance me, people trying to deceive me, to take money out of my pocket. I'm like, I grew up in the church. Why are you scaring me with tithes? Why are you scaring me with hellfire? What's all this nonsense? Why are people trying to use me? You have the pastor arrogating. I'm like, you can't do that. So anyway, I got completely discombobulated with church. I was just like, nah, I can't be bothered anymore. And then I ran into a friend who said he's a babalawo. And I found that like jarring, like babalawo in the 21st century. How come? And then he said to me, I would die Ifa, consult the oracle on your behalf and tell you what's up. So the journalist is like, okay, that's interesting. But yeah, what do we do? So I fast forward. This guy just gave me some insight into my life, and I'm very suspicious. So in my mind, I'm thinking, what's an educated guess? You can say, Big Shag, you are doing really well, but you are not where you should be. Of course, everybody would think they are not where they should be. You might say, oh, I'm a successful journalist, but I know where I want to be. Emmy nominated, and so what? There are things that I desire. So I feel like if somebody said, you are not where you should be, that's just trying to use style as we call it. So I wasn't really sold, but he had my attention. And then he said, be careful because in your workplace, they are going to. So he consulted the oracle and he came up with an Odu. I can't remember anymore. That Odu was about a hunter who went hunting, found that a trap had been set. The trap had caught a game, like a rodent, but he didn't catch the rodent properly. The rodent was about to escape. So while the hunter was having empathy for whoever set the trap, trying to make sure the rodent doesn't escape, the guy that set the trap showed up, then accused him of trying to steal. He said, no, I wasn't trying to steal it. I was trying to help you make sure it doesn't escape. So I'm thinking, right, what's that got to do with me? He said, you are going to have false accusation in your place of work. Somebody's going to accuse you of something that's going to be, dire. Unless we do this 822 and Ebo, you could be in trouble. Now, I live in the UK and I work in the UK, and you know how things can be really tricky here, with laws and regulations. So I said, okay, go ahead and do it. Ladies and gentlemen, without going too much into details, I had some accusations in my workplace because I was a bit of a, problem because I just didn't like things the way they were going, the things that we deal with here, subtle racism and all of that. So I was always challenging my colleagues who were white. I was always like, so why am I the one to do it? Why can't you do it? Don't you ever tell me what to do? That was me at work. So there was some gang up. I came to work. The manager said, Peter, can I have a word? And then these things came. They actually sent me home while they were investigating. So, I had goosebumps like, holy cow. So I called him like, yo, I've just been accused of doing something that I did not do, which is shocking because I'm the guy that is trying to protect the people at work. Now I've been accused of this and so forth. There's so much that I could share. So with that, he had my attention. And then he said, you have to do Oridibo. Bori, your head is your essence. It's in coma, it's asleep. Let's ask your Ori what he wants, so that when we do what we need to do, you can evolve into your essence, into who you should be. Okay, so I think what I'm going to say at this point is it was easy for me to navigate this place, because once I realized that the things I grew up thinking, the devil worship, where I would jettison all that I believed in, the way I was raised in a Christian home, to be a decent human being, to be kind and compassionate. I was waiting for the moment where that one will go into the bush and they will say, "Oh, yeah, bring your son," or something. Just that intrigue of being a journalist, like, "Oh yeah, I will get to the bottom of this thing." I'm waiting for that part that will be like, "Oh wow, I've entered it." That never happened. As a matter of fact, because at some point in my life I had anger issues. This guy will be saying to me that Iwapele is what I need to imbibe that would help me, that I have to address anger without necessarily even encountering me. This guy was in South Africa, I was in Manchester, and everything was done on Skype, and I was just intrigued. How do you know about my anger issues? How you say, Oduimu, Ibinu Jade. Ibinu ló ń jáde constantly nínú Oduyo. Ibinu Jade, Ibinu ma ba nǹkan jẹ́. So it became my person. At this point, I hadn't embraced it because I was raised in the church. I'm not supposed to. I'm not about to become an Ifa worshiper and be calling Obatala, Ishu, and all these things. No, Anyway, but this is the guy I go to. I'll contact this guy and say, "Yes, I'm about to do this. I'm about to apply for this visa. I'm about to do X, Y, Z. I'm a bo Ori. I'm a bo Egbe. I'm a bo Obatala. I'm a bo Ogun." That's what I do. Well, Amara, Aaron, Amara, so as I kept on, it's almost like it eased me into the process where the concept of Afeshe was not jarring anymore. It wasn't, unsettling anymore. From being a Christian to now having this kind of conversation about and then gradually I found that I wasn't as uncomfortable as this process anymore. But when I started to get results, when I started to go from mundane life to doing incredible things, like getting a phone call from the BBC to say, "We would like to employ you." After I started, this process of aspiring for great things from my mundane life, where I go to work, do my menial job, make a living, pay my wages, buy stuff for my kids, buy stuff for my wife, watch my massive TV, and be happy. And all of a sudden, I'm here in Europe with the European Union. I'm like, "Oh my goodness, I'm working for the European Union. Wow." And then all of a sudden, I'm in the BBC. Wow. And I just felt, okay, this is where I'm going to go. But because I still had that challenge of a Miomo Igbagbo, that wake up in the morning and call on Jesus and all of that and pray the rosary and sing psalm. Now I'm going to be waking up and say, "Olodumare, Atobajaye, Asheda Orun," all of that. Yami. I was like, oh, wow, So then the journalism came in, where I then started to research and, just read literature and read books, and look for scholarly work, like people like Wande Abimbola and all of that. And then realize people like Wale Soyinka. So gradually, it then became a thing of heritage. So it wasn't really about, oh, Christian, Islam. It was like, no, as a Black person, right? That the people that have come into our community to then demonize our deities. Then I realized I went into the whole Ajayi Crowder concept. And then I realized, I'm going to second, even the word they shoot, Satan, we don't have that in African spirituality. God didn't have anybody rebelling against him. It was God, and that's it.
Okay.
So I'm like,
Peter,
so
I think we have to.
I believe that
Peter,
Elijah
Peter
ascended into heaven.
Okay.
On a chariot of fire. I have no problem disbelieving that.
Peter, can you hear me?
Why then are these stories about my ancestry so ridiculous? So everybody have their ancestries. So let the Jews have Abraham and Isaac and Elijah. Well, I have Obatala, and Orumila. Why the Buddhists have theirs, I'm going to have mine. So it just became a thing of heritage, a thing of pride. I'm like, well, this is where it's going to be. Now I know there's the placebo effect. such that what you believe in will work for you. Because when I was a Christian, when I was a Catholic, we have things we call novena, where you do a special prayer. Our Lady of Good Remedy, Saint Philomena, the Wonder Worker. These are prayers that I prayed as a kid that I believe in tremendously. And I will tell you, I had moments where things were not supposed to work, but once I made my prayer to the Blessed Virgin Mary of Wonder, Our Lady of Good Remedy, is what they call it. It was a very special prayer for me. Whenever I need things done, I'll make that prayer. So it was easy to make that transition. And the evangelical that was supposed to be the breath of fresh air, that one was such huge disappointment for me.
Well, let me stop you there. Let me stop you there, Peter, because the subject today is not. I think we will need to come and have you have a proper conversation on you converting.
I came here wanting to listen to.
Yeah, no, you will now. You will now, because I don't want us to turn it into a religious thing. I just wanted a short comment of your transition from being a journalist. Professor. No, but that's fine. That's fine. It's very refreshing, actually. It's very refreshing. And I'm sure we're going to have a show that will just focus on you. But for today, it is about everything but the religious side of it, if it is possible. According to Dr. Adegbola, in Ifa, you don't compartmentalize. You don't break them into different religion, science, this and that. And it's a whole thing. But I will ask Doctor, do you identify at all with the things that Peter has, said? And of course, I would want you, I heard you on social media recently talk about dividing 2000 by 3, and how Ifa managed to convert that into something. Just tell us about that again to refresh people's mind. They may not even be linking you with that, which is trending on social media now. How Ifa taught us how we could, divide 2000 into 3 equal parts. Okay, go ahead, Dr. Adegbola.
Well, I must compliment Mr. Peter Macjob. I have actually read his experience, how he had to deal with all this, how he told his mother and all that. How I mean, this is my field. I investigate, and I do know you very well. And it's such a pleasure to be sitting face to face with you.
The pleasure is mine, sir.
Divided by this. Yeah. But going back to what Shekun is requesting, I mean, it is a lot more than dividing the 2000 by 3. The whole Ifa experience, or should I even go to the Orunmila, the person? The Orunmila was a genius by any standard, because what Orunmila did is to, like I said before, put together large volumes of information such that people can be guided. Because once you have had an experience before, you want to be able to use it for the future. How then do you put that information together and be able to retrieve it? That was where the genius of Orunmila came, because Orunmila put together this large volume of text, of historical information, and all the aspects of modern library science he put into it. He did classification, he did cataloging, he did indexing, such that the information is easily retrievable. So from that point of view, you wonder that, I mean, I have traced Ifa back to middle 1600s as documented in writing, because around 1650 something, King Pasiphae of Alada sent an Okmo Ifa to King Felipe of Spain as a diplomatic exchange. So, which means it has existed from 1600. Orally, I have traced it back to 1400, because you know the Odu Ifa that ushered the coronation of a certain Alaafin of that era. So if Orunmila had done all this cataloging, indexing, classification and all that from about 1400. And we now talk of Dewey, who was born only in 1850 something, as the father of library science. Then we see that we have done ourselves a lot of disservice by mystifying Ifa and making it inaccessible to scholarship. And beyond that, you find that the whole the stories, the stories in Ifa, they are all based on analogies. And for the Yoruba, the Yoruba educational system, the way I have studied and I have systematized it, we can look at it in three main levels. One, the early childhood education, which I call the Alo school, is based on telling tales, moralistic tales, tales about how to live a good life. And they are all based on analogies. Law talks about analogy because one law the one you understand, you twine it, to convolve it with the one you don't understand, so that you can use your knowledge of the one you understand to navigate the one you don't understand, which is what a law is. Both a law akpamo, a law akpagbe. That's the first level of education in the what we might call secondary education, which I call the Owe school. That too is based on analogy. The word Owe actually is Owe, the one with which you compare it, the one with which you wrap it, with the one with which you understand it. Because I mean, dialects like Ijebu, for example, say, "You're waking for me." That is means, please explain it to me. So you see that Owe is basis for explanation, is basis for comparison, is basis for wrapping things up. The whole of them, the whole of the whole thing is Itan. That is that with which you illuminate, that with which you spread it out thin so you can see through it, that with which you reflect light from it so you can see it very well. You see that all these are based on analogies. When Orunmila decided to develop his information retrieval system, he went digital. He then formulated a system by which you can refer to any of the Odu that he has classified into 256, I will say, libraries rather than just books or sets of stories, because they are voluminous and they are still growing. They are dynamic. So it's best to refer to that as 256 libraries. Now, if you have 256 large libraries, you need to find a way by which you will get to each of the library and get the appropriate. So he did the classification. Then he did the cataloging, by which you have metadata that refers to a particular verse, a particular system, by the name of the author, by the subject matter, by various things. I mean, for example, one of the characteristics of an Oduifa is that they usually start with the name of the Babalawo. We have things like Awuruku Madagba, these are the metadata that talk about the authorial, the authorship and the authorial characteristics of the Odu. So for somebody to have done that in before 1400, I consider it an insult to refer to that person as a god with small g. He is a genius, a human being, a genius, a philosopher. And then you now find that all the mathematics that we do today to make computers work, that we use for us, all of them are there. Orunmila, for example, there's this Oduifa that says Orunmila had 8 children. Is it an accident that Orunmila had 8 children? 8 is the golden number of a binary arithmetic. And Orunmila happens to have 8 children, and each of the 8 children, he gave each 16 ikin, 16 palm nuts, and taught them to manipulate the palm nuts in such a way that you will either get 1, 0, or 1 whenever you deal with it, which, when you look at it clearly in mathematics, it taught them what we call modulo arithmetic. before 14 something. And all that came all the way up. Now in 1815, George Bull was born. And George Bull now said the things that Orunmila has been saying from before 14 something. They now title the whole subject Boolean algebra. I just look at that and say, look, if we do not bring to the fore the depth of knowledge that God has given to this genius called Orunmila, we will be we will be irresponsible. It will be irresponsible of us, and the whole of humanity will have us to blame for some of the scientific problems that we are still having that don't have solutions yet. That probably Orunmila and his colleagues and the other sages of his time had produced solutions to, that are now hiding in oratoral texts, just because we went to school and we learned to find information only in written materials. All the things that I've been saying that people have been finding intriguing is because I have sat down and have found a formula of getting scientific knowledge out of oratoral texts. And I found a situation where I am beginning to see that a lot of knowledge, a lot of practices that we see as religious rituals are actually scientific routines that the Awo knows to be so. But all of us as Ogberi, when we say, hey, it's a religious ritual, we will let Awo will not say anything. Awo is comfortable with what they are doing. They understand their process and they are making good its use. And if you like, misunderstand it. If you like, misrepresent it. Well, they are beginning to fight back at misrepresentation. But my point is just that there is so much in these things that we need to visit it and deal with it in a systematic way. I mean, I've been teaching my students in the last 40 years. I've been teaching engineering using the knowledge I've derived from these things, and my students are all over the world doing well. I mean, graduates of my process doing well. So for me, I see a need to look at this thing systematically and bring out the scientific knowledge in it and use it to improve the world. We owe it to the world. I believe that God gave it to us. We need to implement that responsibility. We need to demonstrate that responsibility that God has given us to improve the world with the scientific knowledge in Ifa.
Every day, I go and I sit with, well, not every day, but a lot of times, I go and I sit with Baba, OBJ, or Basanjo in the evenings. And I see him sit with a gentleman, and they go on and play this game called Okmo Ayo. And you have been using Okmo Ayo, or is it Ayo Okmo? You have been using this. You have been using this to teach your computer science students for 15 years. How?
30 years.
For 30 years. How? What is the
30 years.
What is the relationship between Okmo Ayo now and computer science that you've been teaching your students?
Well, it is such an unfortunate calamity that the way we are trained, we do not realize that technology answers questions raised by culture and engages problems formulated by culture. And because we learn in English, we attribute every technological wonder to Oyinbo. It is a calamity. I think one of the worst things in the world that can happen to any people is for them to be colonized. Whatever they say or do not say will be attributed to colonial mentality. Whatever they do or do not do, whatever they wear, whatever they eat or do not eat, it's all colonial mentality. And they accept it. And then they live these miserable pedestrian lives as a caricature of themselves, full copies of what they're supposed to be, enjoying their lives. Ayo Olokmo is the most appropriate game that I have encountered that can be used to teach, first of all, basics of traditional computing. By traditional computing, I mean the good old data processing, information systems, and all that. And also to teach artificial intelligence.
Wow.
At the When artificial intelligence was growing as a subject, it was popular to use chess as the ground norm. If you can get the chess, if you can get the computer to beat the world grandmaster, then the computer has demonstrated intelligence. Then it went to Go, the Oriental game. You see, those two games, they are games that are based on positions, location in space. Ayo Olokpon is 100% a game of numbers. You do not need to transfer the the thinking of the game from a positional locational problem to a number problem, because anything that you need to tell a computer, you must find a way of turning it into numbers. But Ayo Olokpon is already a game of numbers. So even the neophyte can engage with it. So when I, I meet my students for the first time, I get them to write a program to create a computer version of Ayo Olokpon. And it is always very exciting for even for those of them who are aspirant white men, that they come in the first day, they just play the game. I have lots of boards and seats in my office. I just set them up, they play, then they begin to enjoy it. Then they begin to develop their strategies. Then they begin to try to beat the opponents. So by the time I've done that for them, I now say, create a computer version of this game. In the days of Java, C++, and C Sharp, it takes about 3-4 days. But these days, in the days of Python, by the second day, they've completed their game. And through that, I've taught them data structures, I've taught them algorithms, I've taught them algorithmic complexity, I've taught all the basic things in computer science. And next, I now tell them, can you make the computer take a decision of which hole to play at any given time? And then they will start with doing it randomly. Just get the computer to generate a random number between 1 and 6 and play that. And then you see that, yeah, the computer, and then set the computer up to play against itself. Set the computer up to play 20,000 games. And within a few minutes, the computer has played 20,000 games and comes out with the answer. And I said, do you see that? It is 50-50. Neither of the two sides are winning. Now, let the computer take a decision each time it sees that, I can pick this extra 2 from there. And then they see the difference. Now, how do you now get the computer to be able to make intelligent moves? And then I ease them into things like we would describe as reinforcement learning, where we are teaching the computer to learn by punishment and reward. And after a few days, the computer can play for a few days on it by itself, learning how to get the reward, how to avoid the punishment. And you find that it becomes impossible for a human being to beat the computer. There's nothing as fulfilling as that for a student, other than you are teaching them algorithms, they don't know why you are teaching them. You are teaching them quadratic equations, they don't know why they are learning it. You are teaching them Fourier analysis, they don't know what use it is. But this type of teaching is one in which the student is always seeing the victory, it's always seeing the reward, it's always seeing the ultimate, it's always seeing the achievement 2-3 steps away, and it is always an impetus to throw themselves into it. I have students who, by the end of the first day, they go home, they are calling me by 1 a.m. because they are still not sleep in their homes. They are try to work things out, and they are stuck, and they want to come and show off the next day. So they called me by 1 a.m. I said, please don't wake me up at this time. And I looked at it and I solved their problem for. So these are the kind of things that we achieve when we train our children, when we train our young people based on their culture, based on things around them, based on solving problems around them, not just creating make-believe problems for them to solve because the lecturer has solution to it, and the lecturer will never give them problems that he can solve. So because that shows him up as a deficient himself. But when you give students problems that benefit them, that give them satisfaction when they solve, it's a totally different way of learning. The only sorry thing is that, and this is not anybody's fault, it's problem that we are all dealing with, is that 90% of these students are benefiting Bloomberg, Lloyd's, companies, big companies all over the world working in their artificial intelligence department, and that's the sorry part of it. But
so we breed them. We breed them and they use them.
One person can solve.
We breed them here and they use them there. Now you have put all of us in trouble because all of us will start to call you up at 2 a.m., 3 a.m. to take us through another another page in this your master class. But let me go to Peter now. Peter, you've listened to Dr. Adegbola. So beyond your religious inclination towards Ifa, what's your thoughts now? What do you think now? Just listening to him now.
Yeah,
what's going through your mind?
I just found it intriguing. I think there's been a lot of disservice, as the doc has said, to this phenom that is Ifa, in terms of the mysticism that surrounded it and the misrepresentation and the misinformation. But I feel like we've done ourselves a disservice because I feel like we had the opportunity to use this, for the scientific aspect of it, because sometimes I've thought about it myself, as a critical mind, to be like, how is this working? Yes, we all believe in this divine as people of faith and the metaphysical and all of that. So it's not magic. But there's a part of me that feels like there must be a scientific element to all of this, where what you hear, what you read, what you're exposed to, sets you up in a certain way where the universe, then aligns itself, where the opportunities that you're supposed to benefit from start finding you, almost like the law of attraction. And I feel like there's a scientific element to this thing. They're not just hocus pocus. So I've always been intrigued about it, and just listening to the doctor now is just giving me some clarity.
Okay.
Just giving me some clarity, and that's been my experience so far.
Fantastic. Doctor, we are Yorubas, we are Yorubas. This is our own thing. You traced it back to 14 something. And here we are in the 21st century, breeding a few of these geniuses and then sending them out. Where do we start this homecoming? Just this return to our roots, return to the knowledge that we have had through all of civilization, through all of existence, as a matter of fact. Where do we now start to reset the buttons of, a new civilization for our people? I'm just thinking, there's so much you have told us this morning, but where do we start the resetting all of those buttons? Doctor?
Well, for me, as a scholar, as somebody who engages knowledge for a living, for me, the first thing we need to do is to reorientate our academics, our university people. We need to convince ourselves that knowledge, technology, and advancement is not an English speaker. that there's nothing English about progress. There's nothing English about science. In fact, for a long time, the English studied science in Latin. And it was when they realized that they are going nowhere as long as they continue to study science in Latin that they started studying it in English. And that's when they made their breakthrough. Today, as of today, there's only one country in the whole wide world that taught science and technology to its children and achieved industrial breakthrough. The only one is Singapore. All the other countries in the world that have achieved industrial breakthrough taught their children science and technology in their own languages. And it is not mystical, it is not esoteric. When you raise a generation of children and you send them to school, and the first 2 years in school, they are still teaching them the language in which they are going to teach them, when are they going to start to learn? When are they going to start to learn? And for us, because parents have now found that when their children go to school, they may fall back because of their inability to catch up with English. Parents started speaking English to their children at home. Unfortunately, they are speaking demotic English. Because the parents themselves do not understand English. A parent thinks that if her or if his or her child can say blah blah black sheep, they don't even know it is ba black sheep. They say blah blah, or they say omana na anafa, which is British geography. Old MacDonald had a farm. He's Scottish. He lives in the north. He's doing his agric there. And because they are not aware of that geography, they are not aware of that culture, they just mouth the songs. And they now breed children who become superstars, musicians, whose music consists of just 2 or 3 sentences because they can't speak English well, they can't speak Yoruba well. So that is one area we have to understand, that there is no language that is not capable of expressing anything that comes out of the human mind. And if we teach our children in the language, when the language of the home becomes the language of education, then education becomes intuitive. It is not something you do in school. They are then able to learn from their environment. But when they are totally immune to the environment, they don't know the names of objects in their environment, then they are living in a cocoon, they're living in a balloon. The next thing is to now teach our intellectual, well, our academics, maybe not intellectuals, because not every academic is an intellectual. We need to teach our academics how to get scientific information from orature. Orature is not necessarily inferior to literature. Yes, it has the advantages of mobility, it has the advantages of permanence and all that. But modern information communication technologies has removed those advantages, because you can speak to your phone and it will record what you say, and you can send it much faster than you send a piece of paper, which was the power that literature was using over orature. So we have to go back and look at some of those things. The environment has changed. The facilities to use a lot more from our past are now available, but we are still behaving as though we are still living in the agrarian age. And I was saying earlier on that all those who teach their children in their own languages have achieved industrial breakthrough. It is interesting that language will have that much effect on the industrialization. We are now in the information age. And guess what? Information is based 100% on language. Industry is not even necessarily language, because there's no German way of depressing the accelerator of a BMW. There's no British way of depressing the changing the gear of a Rover. There's no American way of holding the steering of General Motors. But we are now in the information age. And if we continue with this attitude in the information age, where we are not able to take ownership of our media of knowledge, then what we are now referring to as globalization will just become a second wave of colonization. Because colonization was taking our natural resources, our physical material. We are now in the age of non-material. Information is non-material. And it is built on language. And if all our lives we are building our future on a language that evolved in an area so far away from us, that does not express our environment with efficiency, then we are going to continue to live life with inefficiency. If we start from the area of language and the ability to take information from our past, even before we start finding gems of technology in our past, the fact that we have become sufficiently confident that our past is ennobling, it will change the way we think. As 100%. Long as we stop seeing, when we stop seeing technological wonders and go, Onyibo, as long as we stop saying things like, aeroplane like Onyibo, and start trying to, we too have something like that.
Doctor.
And start facing real problems in our environment and using available science and technology developed in-house, homegrown, to solve our problems, then we'll be on our way.
Okay,
Doctor, I wanted to jump in there, Doctor.
Okay, so
just the point you were raising there.
And all those people feed our remittance economy.
So, Doctor, so I remember vividly, maybe I was 8 or 9. We have these programs that we watch on TV, and because we were upper middle class, you would say, we had the video cassette, Betamax, we had the color TV, all of that, and we spent all our life watching TV. So we watched everything that was available, and they had just 2 channels, OGTV and NTA. So whatever they were offering, we were watching. And so we got caught up in a lot of Yoruba movie. And some Babalawo will bring some tablet. They will call somebody that's supposed to be far away, and the person will appear. And they'll be talking to the person. And as kids, we used to laugh our head off at the foolishness, at the stupidity. Because obviously, we grew up in a very Western setup. We went to private school and all of that. We had nuns and white people as our tutors. So we just thought our African Yoruba way was just really stupid and backward. Because how can you talk to somebody that is far away on some tablet and be seeing the person and the person is seeing you? That makes no sense. The first time that I had a Skype call, I had a moment where I thought to myself, oh, wow. It's been like 15 years or 20, well, not 15, about 30 years that I first had the inkling of something like this. It was in a Yoruba movie where a Babalawo had called somebody that was far away and the person appeared. So our people have already had a concept of video call way before now. Just to buttress the point you've made, Fantastic. Professor.
Yeah.
And also, I remember when children dropped out of school because they said they were not smart enough, because they could not speak English and they could not communicate. And then they say, Ore Okpole Ogbewe is not smart enough for books. Let him go and learn to be a mechanic. When people's car break down and you open that bonnet, it looks like rocket science. Then you have to get some boy that is not educated, some boy that is supposed to be illiterate, would then dismantle an entire engine system and put it straight back. That's an engineer. That's a smart person. And look, and it's language that causes the service. Just to round it up, I spoke earlier about my time in the European Union. I had friends who had PhDs whose grammar was shocking because they were from Belgium, Romania, Lithuania, right? They got their degrees using their own language in their countries. English was a subject. So some of them, they didn't like it as much, so their tenses was all over the place. You know, oh, Peter, you, me, friend, when you come Belgium, you visit me, I visit you. Me take you, my house, you stay. We're done. You know, very, very, scanty grammar. But they had a PhD in their field of study, and they were a doctor, and they had all the regards. But the fact that they didn't speak English it did not undermine them in any way, shape, or form. So, it got me thinking, like, yeah, attributing English speaking, oratory skills, eloquence to intelligence, and then demeaning our own language like Yoruba speaking is a problem. I think, like you said, that's where we need to start. We need to reorient it completely.
Dr. Adegbola,
yeah.
Just listening to you, the picture that comes to my mind is that, look, our musicians. I watched a concert recently of Ashake somewhere in the world, and I saw white people singing in Yoruba, singing his lyrics. His lyrics were largely Yoruba, singing in Yoruba along with Ashake.
Well, I mean, I must say that Ashake's cultural diplomacy is probably superior to the whole of the Nigerian diplomatic system. Ashake definitely has achieved for Nigeria a lot more than than all the system of the Nigerian external affairs. I mean, you see Europeans, you see Americans, you see just swooning, the rhythm, the poetry, the sheer novelty of the type of rhythmic and rhyme that he uses, totally different from what the English are used to. It just excites them. And that is what I mean by we are not contributing to the world what God has given us specially. Because every set of peoples in the world have the advantages of their environment, and the environment will give them privileged insight into certain parts of nature that is exposed. I mean, the first day that I woke up by 9 o'clock with the sun in the sky, and I was rushing to go for my meeting, which was supposed to be 9:30, until I was told it is 9 o'clock at night. I couldn't believe it because I've never seen the sun at 9 o'clock in my life. But there are people who had been seeing the sun at 9 o'clock, and they were the ones that came to teach me summer solstice and winter solstice and equinox when I was in secondary school, and it just made no sense to me. But there are things in my environment that God expects me to teach the world, and that is what we have been able to do very, very elementarily with people like Ashake, with all these other young people, boys and girls.
Davido,
yes,
and all these guys.
Yeah,
and in film,
Hollywood.
And in film, yeah.
And film, yes. It is elementary compared to what we can do. All these are young people and not too young people who go abroad and become stars in technology. It is what is left of what they were able to do with Western education. Had they had proper education grounded in our culture, they'll be doing a lot more. They'll be showing the world things that we do not know yet.
Can I add something? Can I add something, please, really quickly? As amazing as our young people in the music industry or the entertainment industry are doing, somebody like Ashake, Davido, Wizkid, all of them, imagine if they added fashion into it. Rather than Balenciaga and Versace, Imagine if Ashoke and Adire and all of that was also added into that mix. Imagine what that would do for that economy. Yes, that music is doing amazing things. They're all eating pounded yam and egusi over social media. But if Ashoke and Kampala and all of that comes into that mix, imagine what that would do.
Wow. And
Yes,
film.
you're right.
You didn't speak about film at all.
I talked about the cultural diplomacy. What about the cultural economy? That's very important. And you see, the reason why we go to learn other people's languages is because there's something in our pocket we want to take. But if you do not pitch your own language also, nobody will be interested in whatever you have in your pocket, and you won't even be able to offer anything from your pocket because there is a $1 value to every language. And that is what determines what a language that is important. It's not just the number of speakers that says a language is important. It is how rich those who speak the language are. It's what determines whether the language attracts patronage or not. So, I mean, we have a long way to go, but we can take at least a step. And that for me is the way I choose to live my life. I just go one step at a time.
I think it was alluding that young people, kind of use the concept of Ifa as intimidatory. I think this problem that we're having with Yahoo Plus, people going into rituals, etc., and how they allude that to Ifa. And I feel like that's something for the future that needs to be addressed, because even within that community of devotees, you have a lot of unscrupulous elements who will tell you that they're gonna help you through Ifa, to help your hustle, etc., etc. So it's a problem within that community of Ifa itself, where as devotees we say you need to clean house.
Because once you limit Ifa to spirituality, then
it has that element.
Then you have this big challenge, and how to get.
It's not even just limited spirituality. Once you address the spirituality with a certain level of ignorance, I was in a meeting. I was in a meeting 2, 3, 4 weeks ago, in which devotees of Ifa were speaking to the Nollywood industry, saying that you are misrepresenting what we believe. And it was very enlightening for me, who have known that for a long time, because all the Ifa that I have studied, there are a lot of things that we see in some of these films that I say, well, all the Ifa I've read, I've never seen this. I don't know where these people are getting this from. So it is just ignorance. I think the solution to the problem is for enlightenment.
That's it.
Public enlightenment, a reversion to history, a reversion to valorizing who we are and looking critically at our past.
100%.
I say this, that we tend to explain our past only by mysticism. And that is not possible, that anybody will live such that their past is only explainable by mysticism. There's a lot of science, there's a lot of technology in our past. The Ife bronze, the Oparon, they were not commanded. They were they were made. They were
built,
formed.
They were made.
They are artifacts. They are artifacts made by the hands of men. Yes. And we now go to learn metallurgy abroad.
Well, you see, Ifa is a Yoruba thing. And as Yorubas, we have a responsibility to a chunk of the world, probably the largest single tribe, if I can use that word, in the black race.
Ethnic group.
Ethnic group, okay, ethnic group in the black race. And we can trace the Yoruba to Bahia in Brazil, to Trinidad and Tobago.
All the slave routes.
All these, particularly all those that went through the slave trade for 500 years. They still maintain some of their Yoruba culture and tradition. And so you can trace them to Yoruba, and you can find aspects of Ifa within that, doesn't this place a huge responsibility on us as Yorubas here in Nigeria to start this enlightenment? Because you spoke about enlightenment. It's not just for you. You have done a great deal of work, Tunde Adegbola, through your teaching of students and scholars and all of that. But where would this enlightenment come from? Is it government? Is it who?
I think
Where?
it's going to be.
What do we do?
I think it's holistic. It's holistic. Everybody has to play their part. The professor is playing his part in the academia. I'm a journalist. I working for a big organization like the BBC. Finding out there's a religion department, and then approaching them, seeing that they've done stories about Judaism, they've done stories about Catholicism, Islam, and I say I want to do a story about Ifa. I want to do a story about Ifa, pushing it, making sure I got the commission, and I got it out there on the BBC radio, on the BBC podcast, on the website, on the homepage of the BBC, and on social media. That's my part. For people that make films, which I've just joined, it's our responsibility that when we make our content, it's time for the lion to tell its story, not the hunter all the time. Let the lion tell its story now. Let the lion win, right? Okay. Let's have some dignity. And then we have podcasts all over the place. There's a guy called Waishere addressing these things on podcasts. So I think it's a collective, but we need the government. They need to step up as well.
But Peter, Bolahon, I like the Bolahon more than the Peter.
I know, right? Sometimes
final words, final thoughts from you. Final words, final thoughts.
I'm just really pleased to be, able to have this conversation with the good doctor. It's been very enlightening. But I think on a passing note, I think it's important as a people that we stop self-hate and self-loathing. I feel like it starts from a place of self-hating. It's why we would denigrate our own tradition and heritage in such a way. So I think if we approach it from that aspect, and we look at it open-mindedly, we pick the one that works for us, the ones that we feel like we don't agree with, we ask questions, and then we go from there. As again saying, anything to do with this thing, I don't want to know.
Dr. Adegbola, your final words, your final thoughts on today's program.
Yes, I just like to reiterate the issue of language. Language of education is very important because it is part of what makes us feel inferior. Because we feel our language is not good enough to push education, then we feel anything we achieve is because we can speak English. Yet, ours is one of the few languages in the world that can be spoken with drums. And we don't see any value in that. So we need to look inward. We need to reflect. We need to cast the mentality that tells us we are inferior and see ourselves as an important part of the world that God has made and play our role in it.
On behalf of all our listeners from all over the world, we want to thank both of you for coming on the show today. I think we shall have a part 2. This subject deserves a second part. I've thoroughly enjoyed myself today. I hope all of you listening have also done so. And on your behalf, I thank Dr. Tunde Adegbola and Peter Macjob for giving us their time this morning. It's been truly, truly terrific. So my final words, congratulations to our Egmo Okutunje Ilano, who celebrated his 85th a few days ago. And of course, your brother in Ibadan, Tunde Fagbenle, whose birthday was yesterday. The writer, the writer was yesterday. So I congratulate both of you. So join us again next week, Saturday, when we bring you another edition of 90 Minutes with Mathematical on Eagle 7 Sports Radio 103.7 FM. Bye for now.